The president is also granted a $50,000 annual expense account, $100,000 non-taxable travel account, and $19,000 for entertainment. This is more money than the average person will see in a lifetime, and after leaving office, most presidents are able to capitalize on book tours and speaking engagements. But not all presidents are created equal. Today, we're counting down the top 10 richest presidents in history. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR for short, is one of the most beloved and well-known U.S. presidents of all time. He is perhaps most famous for the New Deal, which put millions of Americans to work and pulled them out of the crippling financial stress of the Great Depression. He made a sizable income as a businessman in New York before he ever became president. As a trained lawyer, politician, and businessman, Roosevelt accrued a net worth that was equivalent to $66 million when adjusted for inflation. In the 1910s, Roosevelt earned about $20,000 per year, $5,000 as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, $5,000 from renting out his New York townhouse, and the rest from investment returns on his trust fund. Yet his expenditures, which included 5 children in fashionable boarding schools, 10 servants, half a dozen memberships in elite clubs, and first-class travel, ran ahead of his income. The solution was a $25,000 per year job at the Fidelity and Deposit Company. In 1926, Roosevelt sank about $200,000, or 2/3 of his personal estate, in a hydropathy spa in Warm Springs, Georgia, that helped him to cope with the paralysis of his legs, an affliction that began in late 1921 after an attack of polio. Bill Clinton was the 42nd President of the United States, and the second to be impeached. He oversaw the country's longest peacetime economic expansion. Elected U.S. President in 1992 and re-elected in 1996, Clinton enacted legislation including the Family and Medical Leave Act and oversaw 2 terms of economic prosperity. Clinton was impeached by the House of Representatives in 1998 following the revelation of his affair with Monica Lewinsky, but he was acquitted by the Senate in 1999. But regardless of how you feel about his politics, it cannot be denied that Bill Clinton is a very wealthy man. His net worth is close to $75 million. His net worth was modest when he was a practicing lawyer, before he got into politics. But in the years since his presidency ended, Clinton has earned millions of dollars through books and speaking engagements. Days after his presidency ended, he earned $125,000 for a speech at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter & Co. in New York, according to a financial disclosure form Hillary filed as a senator in 2002. It was the first of hundreds of paid speeches that collectively made him an estimated $106 million over 15 years. In 2004, he published his best-selling memoir, My Life, one of the former president's 4 titles. Clinton earned an estimated $38 million as an author from 2001 to 2015. Before serving as America's 31st president from 1929 to 1933, Herbert Hoover had achieved international success as a mining engineer and worldwide gratitude as the great humanitarian who fed war-torn Europe during and after World War I. Born in an Iowa village in 1874, he grew up in Oregon. He enrolled at Stanford University when it opened in 1891, graduating as a mining engineer. From there, he moved into the post of U.S. Secretary of Commerce and spearheaded the construction of the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Hoover Dam. In 1928, Hoover was elected president, but 8 months later the stock market crash of 1929 occurred, ushering in the Great Depression. The country never recovered from the shock while he was still in office. Herbert quickly became one of the biggest names in mining and earned the vast majority of his personal wealth before his presidency. All the same, he earned a whopping $100 million net worth over the course of his lifetime. A lifelong humanitarian, as an adult, Hoover was in China during the Boxer Rebellion, and he organized the relief efforts for trapped foreigners. 4 years later, he helped Americans stranded in Europe when World War I began. And for 3 years after, he headed the Commission for Relief in Belgium, helping to obtain food for 9 million Belgians in the aftermath of the massive encroachment of German troops. Lyndon B. Johnson was the 36th President of the United States and was sworn into office following the November 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Upon taking office, Johnson, also known as LBJ, launched an ambitious slate of progressive reforms aimed at creating a great society for all Americans. Many of the programs he championed, Medicare, Head Start, the Voting Rights Act, and the Civil Rights Act, had a profound and lasting impact on health, education, and civil rights. Despite his impressive achievements, however, Johnson's legacy was marred by his failure to lead the nation out of the quagmire of the Vietnam War. Johnson claimed to understand the working class because he was a day laborer in his youth. He worked his way through college and used his degree to become a teacher. However, by the end of his political career, Johnson was fabulously rich, with a net worth equivalent to $109 million. Many have accused him of using his influence unfairly to create a massive media empire, starting with a single radio station in Texas. James Madison is most famous for his work on the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights. He was also president during the War of 1812. Madison served 4 terms in the U.S. Congress. During that time, he helped the Bill of Rights get passed into law, protecting the basic rights of citizens. Later, he became the Secretary of State for his friend Thomas Jefferson. His father, James Madison Sr., acquired substantial wealth by inheritance, and also by his marriage to Nellie Conway, the daughter of a rich tobacco merchant. James's youth was marked by extreme changes. His most vivid childhood memories were of his fears of Indian attacks during the French and Indian War, and of the day his family moved from their little farmhouse to a large plantation mansion, Montpelier. He also suffered from psychosomatic or stress-induced seizures, similar to epileptic fits, that plagued him on and off throughout his youth. Like many of the founding fathers, Madison became extremely rich with the help of slave labor and plantations. He grew crops all over the South, and with his empire made the equivalent of $125 million when adjusted for inflation, making him the 6th richest president in history. Andrew Jackson is one of the most controversial presidents in history. He is respected by some for his assertive attitude and down-home sensibilities, but he is also responsible for the Trail of Tears, a forced march of Cherokee people across the United States, which led to more than 4,000 deaths. More nearly than any of his predecessors, Andrew Jackson was elected by popular vote. As president, he sought to act as the direct representative of the common man. Born in a backwoods settlement in the Carolinas in 1767, he received sporadic education, but in his late teens, he read law for about 2 years, and he became an outstanding young lawyer in Tennessee. Fiercely jealous of his honor, he engaged in brawls, and in a duel killed a man who cast an unjustified slur on his wife, Rachel. Jackson prospered sufficiently to buy slaves and to build a mansion, the Hermitage, near Nashville. It was this slave ownership and enterprise that earned him $132 million over the course of his life, making him the 5th richest president of all time. Theodore Roosevelt, also known as Teddy, was an American statesman, politician, conservationist, naturalist, and writer who served as the 26th President of the United States from 1901 to 1909. He served as the 25th Vice President from March to September 1901, and as the 33rd Governor of New York from 1899 to 1900. Roosevelt emerged as the leader of the Republican Party and became a driving force for the antitrust policy while supporting progressive-era policies in the United States in the early 20th century. His face is depicted on Mount Rushmore alongside George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln. He is generally ranked in polls of historians and political scientists as one of the 5 best presidents. The youngest president of all time, Teddy Roosevelt was also obscenely wealthy. His total net worth was equivalent to $139 million. When his father died, according to the New York Times, Roosevelt inherited $60,000, which is worth about $1.3 million in 2020. In fact, most of Roosevelt's money had to do with the inheritance of wealth. He had a ranching venture in the Dakotas, but it ultimately failed and lost him a large sum of money. However, he managed to win it back through investment in real estate. Thomas Jefferson was a founding father of the United States who wrote the Declaration of Independence. As U.S. President, he completed the Louisiana Purchase, thus more than doubling the landmass of the Union and creating the contours of the country we know today. Jefferson was born into one of the most prominent families of Virginia's planter elite. His mother, Jane Randolph Jefferson, was a member of the proud Randolph clan, a family claiming descent from English and Scottish royalty. His father, Peter Jefferson, was a successful farmer as well as a skilled surveyor and cartographer who produced the first accurate map of the province of Virginia. The young Jefferson was the 3rd born of 10 siblings. Because of his wealthy family, at the tender age of 21, Jefferson inherited a 5,000-acre farm from his parents. He used more than 600 slaves to produce crops and amass a fortune of over $236 million, making him the 3rd wealthiest president in American history. George Washington was Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War and served 2 terms as the first U.S. president from 1789 to 1797. The son of a prosperous planter, Washington was raised in colonial Virginia. As a young man, he worked as a surveyor, then fought in the French and Indian War. During the American Revolution, he led the colonial forces to victory over the British and became a national hero. In 1787, he was elected president of the convention that wrote the U.S. Constitution. Few people know that Washington was born rich, and his privilege continued all throughout his life. His equivalent wealth is $587 million when accounting for inflation. Unseating the first American president by a sizable margin is Donald Trump, the current president of the United States. This fact will not be surprising to most people, because Trump was an extremely public figure before his election. He's known for his resorts and reality TV stardom, among other ventures. Forbes estimates that his net worth is around $3.1 billion. The bulk of his wealth was inherited from his father, Fred Trump, who built a real estate empire over the course of his lifetime. Donald Trump inherited at least